Last night, Fox brought on the Transportation Secretary to bemoan what he called a total failure by the Biden administration to invest in air traffic safety. He insisted that, despite a historic infrastructure law pouring more than $1 trillion into roads, bridges, and broadband, $0 went toward fixing the systems that guide every flight in our skies. You heard that right. According to him, the largest infrastructure package in history somehow skipped the air traffic control upgrade entirely. But let's walk through the real numbers. Under the bipartisan infrastructure law, Congress set aside $5 billion specifically for air traffic facilities modernization. That's $1 billion a year over 5 years, just to replace aging radar and communications equipment, maintain towers, and bring critical buildings up to code. On top of that, $15 billion was earmarked for airport infrastructure projects like runway reconstruction, taxiway resurfacing, and baggage system overhauls, and another $5 billion for competitive terminal grants that enhance passenger flow and accessibility. According to the Government Accountability Office, failure to act on these upgrades carries real risks. Without these investments, systems will continue to deteriorate, leading to service disruptions and safety concerns down the road. To make matters worse, the very person lecturing the administration on fiscal neglect voted against every one of these funding bills when he served in Congress. He now gets to claim innocence while attacking the policy he once rejected. That's Exhibit A in how this regime media winefest unfolds. Blame, obfuscate, and move on, all while the public ends up wondering who actually earned their paycheck. Now shift your gaze to another Fox meltdown. The new pontiff has arrived in Rome, and on state regime airwaves, he's already being labeled the woke pope. A host who openly admits to being outside the faith warns viewers that caring about climate change, LGBTQ rights, or diversity initiatives is somehow out of bounds for a spiritual leader. Before you know it, they're dissecting every stitch of the Pope's crimson mozzetta, that elbow-length cape the pontiff wears over his choir dress. They marvel that this garment calls back to medieval tradition. Even the mozzetta has adorned popes for centuries as a sign of their office. You might wonder why anyone would obsess over a cape. Well, the mozzetta isn't Fashion Week flair. It's a vestment steeped in symbolism. Cardinals don scarlet versions, bishops wear violet, and for one brief Easter season, the Pope appears in a white paschal mozzetta trimmed with ermine as a symbol of renewal. The pushback you're seeing isn't about liturgical nuance. It's about branding tradition as radical. They roll their eyes at the idea that a supreme pontiff could have empathy or prioritize climate stewardship, as if faith and social conscience are mutually exclusive. And in the same breath, they ignore that this Pope was elected through a conclave of cardinals who serve all over the world and who choose a successor not based on politics, but on perceived spiritual leadership. So far, that's 2 acts in tonight's production. A defense secretary turned Fox commentator rewriting infrastructure history, and a host recasting centuries-old religious attire as a political manifesto. Stay tuned, because the Winefest lineup stretches well beyond these 2 acts. But before we pour the next glass, check your facts. Hold your glass steady, and remember that context matters. When guests on your favorite network claim zero investment and zero tradition, know exactly where the receipts lie. You've seen the infrastructure spin and the tradition baiting on your screen. Now let's pull back the curtain on a few more head-scratching moments from state-regulated punditry. First, consider Peter Navarro, once the White House trade czar, now a Fox consigliere, telling viewers that his only guiding principle is trust in Trump, my brother. He proudly frames himself as the architect of a new global trade order, but history tells a different tale. In September 2023, a jury convicted him on 2 counts of criminal contempt of Congress for defying a January 6th committee subpoena. In January 2024, a federal judge sentenced him to 4 months in prison, marking the first time a former presidential advisor received jail time for such an offense. Yet on cable tonight, he stands unrepentant, promising to reshape U.S. trade policy for my brother, all while glossing over the very legal battles he's still fighting. His issue with bad deals is rich, considering he was part of crafting the tariffs that prompted retaliatory levies from allies and unsettled markets during his tenure. Then there's the trade deal with Britain that Fox glossed over. You heard Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick recounting how the UK will send 100,000 cars into America at a reduced 10% tariff, and that U.S. exporters stand to gain $5 billion in new opportunities. That's not hyperbole. This agreement slashes auto duties from 27.5% to 10% for the first tranche of vehicles, removes steel and aluminum tariffs entirely, and opens doors for beef, ethanol, and aerospace exports. In markets, stocks of UK carmakers and Boeing even ticked upward covered on the news. Meanwhile, on the same network that complains about globalist commerce, not a single analyst pointed out that this deal follows Trump's own abrupt imposition of tariffs on Britain earlier this year, a move that sowed uncertainty and sparked complaints from UK manufacturers. Next up is Robert F. Kennedy Jr.'s self-proclaimed Operation Center tour. On Fox, RFK Jr. led viewers through what he depicted as a shadowy HHS command post, where we track people, implying Big Brother tactics. In reality, the HHS Incident Management Program operates a public emergency operations center that coordinates responses to hurricanes, chemical spills, and disease outbreaks, functions mandated by law to protect the public health infrastructure. What Fox didn't mention is that, even as Kennedy brags about running this center, his own agency cut 10,000 jobs just weeks ago, only to announce last month that some positions and programs would have to be reinstated because they were mistakenly eliminated. It's one thing to navigate emergencies, it's another to boast about a public facility while quietly hampering its staffing levels. And let's not forget the mold-breaking counsel from J.D. Vance, the Ohio senator turned Fox talking head, who opined that American girls should have only 2 dolls so that, in wartime, the weapons are made in America. Beyond the eyebrow-raising logic, this statement exposes a worldview that reduces parenting to economic sacrifice and nationalistic theater, an approach that frames childhood playthings as wartime assets. Meanwhile, sales data show that modern toy supply chains mix domestic and imported components, making such a binary 2 versus 30 doll scenario more fantasy than policy. Finally, the 1-2 punch of guest after guest smearing Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett and other critics. You saw the clips. People talk about slap me awake moments or accuse colleagues of going woke for supporting inclusive policies. Yet when you check the facts, those same representatives are pushing for infrastructure grants, veterans services, and local manufacturing jobs, issues that affect the everyday lives of their constituents. The disconnect between cable dramatics and legislative reality has never been more glaring. In this wine fest of wine, you're fed a non-stop diet of blame, alarm, and outrage. But the receipts tell a far richer story. Legal reckoning for former advisors, tangible gains in trade pacts, bureaucratic realities at HHS, and the real work that lawmakers do. The final act of this evening's state-sanctioned spectacle centers on one of Fox's most fervent voices, Judge Jeanine Pirro. Yesterday, President Trump tapped her as the interim U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, elevating a co-host of the Five to one of the nation's top prosecutorial posts. Pirro's resume reads like a Fox News highlight reel: former Westchester County judge, district attorney, early defender of Trump during the Mueller probe, and now Trump's pick to lead prosecutions in the Capitol. Consider the optics. A network pundit who built her brand on fiery monologues is handed the reins of an office charged with upholding the rule of law in a city still on edge from January 6th. It's the culmination of a pipeline that stretches from cable opinion to federal authority. As reporters noted, Pirro's predecessor, Ed Martin, failed to secure Senate backing after his vocal defense of Capitol rioters, forcing Trump to pivot to a more qualified Fox personality. Qualification here seems measured less by legal acumen than by airtime devoted to denouncing the leftist swamp. Meanwhile, the same network that cheered her appointment continues to smear Democratic Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. Crockett, a freshman from Texas, has championed pipeline safety funds, veterans services, and rural infrastructure projects. Tangible wins for her voters, but on air she's reduced to a caricature of going woke. No mention of the bipartisan grants she secured for childcare facilities. No acknowledgement of her successful amendment to boost local manufacturing loans. Instead, she's fodder for another diatribe about the radical left, even as the facts of her legislative record sit ignored in favor of theatrical outrage. Through all of this, you see the pattern. Attack the messenger, misstate the message, and then celebrate appointments that blur the line between commentary and governance. From Sean Duffy's bogus zero investment claims to Peter Navarro's self-serving trade commentary from behind bars, Fox guests spin complex policy into sound bites designed to outrank nuance. Then they cap it off by installing their own stars into powerful roles, cementing an echo chamber where dissent is silenced by credentialed cheerleaders. You've watched them rewrite infrastructure history, recast centuries-old religious vestments as woke propaganda, and turn an emergency operations center into a people-tracking conspiracy. Now you've seen them appoint one of their own to prosecute the law, and you're left asking whether justice will serve the people or the network's narrative. This isn't speculation. It's a pattern laid bare by public records, judicial proceedings, and Senate votes. The next time you tune in, remember to check your facts, hold your airtime accountable, and recognize that the real power isn't always behind the lectern. It's in the narrative they control.